good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching this from. For those of you that have joined us before, thanks again for joining us for another one of our free weekly Zoom sessions. If you're new to watching us, then this is something that we do every week. We change the days and the times as much as we can to try and accommodate a lot of our sort of American viewers who are from different time zones. So we've tried to do morning, afternoon, and evening meetings just so we can get as many people watching live and joining in as possible. The idea behind these sessions is that Carl and Tom and I wanted to sort of put across little nuggets of helpful information that we find as printers on a day-to-day basis that allow us to stand out a little bit from other printers and just up the quality of the little things that we do. So tonight, for example, we're going to be talking about bleed in the artwork and cut lines and making sure that we get that as nice and as neat and as high quality as we can. There are a lot of people out there selling printed graphics and stickers and labels, and there are a lot of people out there that are doing it quite poorly and still being very successful. What I feel is that there's a lot of companies out there that will sell you a machine, they'll sell you the materials, they'll demo what they can do with the machine and what they think makes people money. But there aren't many people out there as successful end users that are willing to help other people improve their business, improve their offerings, and make sure that we're sharing this sort of little bits of knowledge that can help make everybody's products a little bit better. So that's the idea behind what we're doing. We're trying to approach it from the technical side, where Carl's talking to people about how you can improve the quality of your print by making sure your maintenance is kept up to date and that all your calibrations are right. And then I'm coming in from the business side of things and trying to show little hints on artwork and pricing and materials. The hope being that if you listen to one of these sessions for an hour or an hour and a half or however long we go on for, even if you just get one little piece of useful information, then it might be something that makes a difference in your business. And as always, if there's anything that we don't cover or anything you want to cover in more detail, you can always drop us an email or a DM or a message on one of the social platforms and ask us to either clarify or help you out with something else. We're more than happy to do that. So I'll start by just sharing my screen. So we're going to work through, I know a lot of people use CorelDRAW. There's a few other different artwork software platforms out there that people use, but Adobe Illustrator tends to be one of the industry standard sort of programs that people use. It's certainly what I've used over the last 7 or 8 years. So this is what we're going to base it around. So a lot of the shortcuts that we use are going to be Adobe based, but the theory behind what we're doing, the way that we place and design our cut lines, the way that we think about artwork and bleed, it's all going to be the same. So the theory of what we're talking about is the same, whatever piece of software that you're using. So bleed and cut lines are two things that we see asked about a lot on all of the Roland forums, but also something that Carl and I get asked about in person on our in-person training days. But also we get a lot of DMs about people that are having problems with properly putting on their cut lines, making sure their bleed's right, trying to understand the reason behind it and how to best do it. And so hopefully today is going to give you a few pointers about getting that as right as you possibly can. I've put a few examples on here. They're things that we've done before. They're jobs that we've done, and they're examples of jobs that we've seen people having problems with. So again, it won't cover every situation. It won't cover every problem. But again, if you've got a specific piece of artwork that you're really struggling with, then feel free to drop us an email with a copy of it on there and just a description of what you're struggling with. And hopefully we'll be able to help you away from a public forum. Or at the end, if you want to bring it up, hopefully we can chat through it. So first of all, we're just going to look at the basics of what bleed is to start with. So if you look at this very basic template that I've got on the screen now, you'll see that the bleed is the area that's got the blue box around it, the outside area. And really a bleed is part of the artwork that is extending past the cut line. And the reason that we do that is so that if you are cutting, let's say 2, 3, 4 meters of stickers or labels, or you're doing a piece of artwork that is quite big, the chances are that once your machine has printed and it feeds back through ready to cut, even if you've got it, set up properly, it's all calibrated perfectly, there will be some movement. And so the bleed is there to make sure that if you've got a black or a blue or a grey or a red piece of artwork, that you don't have little white pieces showing on the edge of the artwork. So the bleed is you extending part of that artwork beyond the cut line, so that in the event that the machine goes off slightly, to the normal customer who's going to be peeling the stickers or labels, everything looks okay. So sometimes, even if it goes off by 0.5 mil or 1 mil and you've not put any bleed on it, you will see little white areas around the artwork. And then to anyone peeling it off, there's going to be little patchy parts on the end. So the idea of a bleed is that we're extending the artwork past the point of the cut line just to make sure that it looks like a very neat cut. Now, on this example, we've got a flooded coloured background. There are different circumstances where you would bleed out elements of the artwork and not all of it, and we'll go through a few of those later. So on this diagram, you've got the bleed on the outset, and then here with the magenta line is your cut line. And then within that, we've got a safe area. Now, if you are making artwork for leaflets or brochures, it will be pretty standard to have a template for each page or each side of the leaflet set up like this template, where you've got the cutting line or the trimming line, the bleed area, and then the safe area. And again, the idea of the safe area is very similar to the bleed area. And it's making sure that you're not putting text or parts of the image that are important to the sticker or the label or whatever the product is right up against the cut line. And so that in the event that the media does go off and the cut line is slightly out, it doesn't take away pieces of the text or pieces of the image. So as someone that's preparing the artwork ready for print, you're just making sure that from the artwork side of things, when it does go through the machine, you're giving yourself the best chance of a high quality looking finish and making sure that all of the elements of the print are still included on the finished product. It's easier if I show you an example. These are a sheet of electrical stickers that we do that is printed and cut. And if I peel one off, you'll start to see what we mean by the bleed. So you peel the sticker off and there's the bleed area left behind. And then we make sure that on the sticker, all of the edges are covered. So that's a visual example of what your bleed line is. The safe area, you'll see that none of the text goes right to the edge of the sticker. You do see sometimes that people really make the most of the size of the sticker and they'll bring their artwork right to the edge. And it's just about making sure that the layout of whatever it is that you're printing has got that professional look. It looks like it's spaced really well. Everything looks nice and proportioned. And that the main part of the sticker or the label or whatever you're printing is in the center of the piece, rather than moved over to the side where you've got uneven bleeds on the edges. So with your Roland machines, there's a couple of little hints down here. Generally speaking, the standard for a bleed is 3 mil, or if you're in the US, 0.125 of an inch. That tends to be a standard bleed. Depending on what you are printing and how accurate your machine is, you may want to make that bleed a little bit smaller, make that bleed a little bit larger. There will be circumstances with certain pieces of artwork, as well, as you'll see a little bit later in a couple of examples, where you have to have a larger bleed on some areas, and in some areas of the artwork, usually where colours overlap or there's a very complex piece of the design, you may in fact have no bleed. And you might rely on the machine's accuracy to get that cut line absolutely bang on. And so, as well as everything that we're going to talk about in the artwork side of things today, it is really important to make sure that your machine is in good condition, you've got a good blade, your cutting strip is in good condition, the blade holder's okay, and that your print and cut calibration has been done. And if you're in any doubt how to do that, whichever machine that you've got, there's a couple of videos on our YouTube channel where Carl talks through in detail setting up your machine to do the print and cut calibration, and also gives you some information about putting it right if you find that it's out. So everything that we talk about on the artwork does assume that your machine is calibrated well and is going to cut where you're telling it to cut on the artwork. So what we'll do, we'll move down to some examples. And as you can see, we've got a few different types of examples on here, and they range from standard sorts of stickers like this to gradients on text. We've got some examples of large vehicle graphics logos where we've had to manipulate the bleed where colours intersect. And then down here, we've got some other similar examples where you've got multicolours and you're having to deal with different bleeds. It's very difficult to find examples of every sort of job that you'll do. But as we go through these, what I've tried to do is give examples of where people have had issues with their cuts or with their bleed and where we found solutions, and also some of the slightly more complicated bleeds to apply. And we'll go through how we would manually create cut lines as well if you're dealing with a customer that's maybe not got vector artwork. So to start with, let's start with just a very, very basic, if we were cutting our logo from coloured vinyl. So as you know, with all of our Roland machines, you've got a couple of different options. You can use the machine as a standalone printer. You can print and then cut. You could print a job and then laminate it and bring it back into the machine for cutting, or you can use it as a standalone cutter. And again, on our YouTube channel, there are some videos about print, laminate, and cut. Probably one of the most watched videos on our YouTube channel, in fact, is where Carl talks about how to make sure that once you've taken your artwork out of the machine and laminated it, that when you put it back in, you are achieving as accurate a cut as possible. And so if you're not familiar with that process, it is really worth clicking on that video and spending 7 or 8 minutes watching that. So the most basic cutting that we can do is using a pre-coloured vinyl. So if you're over here in the UK, something like Metamark M4 or M7, vinyls that are designed to just be cut, weeded out, and then applied onto either vehicles or signage. And so all you would need for something like that is you would need your vector logo with your cut lines. All of these lines are a little bit thicker than they need to be, just so they show up on the screen a little bit better. But the most important thing about a cut line, and if we just bring our swatches over here, is that if you've downloaded the Roland swatches, then that's fine. If not, you can still create your own spot color. So to create a cut line that the Roland machine will recognize, you need to create a swatch that has the name Cut Contour without any spaces, and a capital C on cut and a capital C on contour. So as you can see popping up in the center of the screen there, Cut Contour. So as standard on the Roland swatches, this is just a pure magenta color, and it's something that the machine will recognize as a cut path rather than a printable color. And this is probably one of the most basic errors that we've seen on people's artwork. And that's absolutely no judgment on the person that's doing it, because it's one of those things that if nobody tells you, you don't know. And so we've had artwork sent to us before by printers where the cut line has been put on just using a magenta color without the understanding that that needs to be a specific name on that color. So it's obviously best to download and use the Roland VersaWorks swatches. And what you'll find again on our YouTube channel is that there's a video on there by Carl where he goes through the process of downloading the Roland swatches onto your computer to use in Illustrator. And you've got here the standard ones for cut contour, you've got white, you've got the one for gloss, and we've got metallic and silver, and also primer. There's obviously ones for perf cutting as well that you can add to this, but we'll stick to just standard cutting. So this is how the artwork would look if you were, let's say, for example, you wanted our logo cut out in red and you wanted to then weed it off and put it onto the side of our van. So this is all you would need to put in. There doesn't need to be any color reference because the material that you're putting in is the color that you want it to be. And what we need to make sure is that we're using that cut contour color for the outline, and that the weight up here is 0.25 point. That is the weight. So we'll weight the line and then we'll make sure it's the correct contour. You'll be able to then put that into VersaWorks. And when you open it in VersaWorks, you'll see what's commonly referred to as the marching ants. You'll see the red lines that look like they're moving around, and that will show you that the machine has recognized the cut line. Now, again, a lot of people have issues where they think they've put a cut line onto something, they'll open it up in VersaWorks and they won't see the marching ants. Sometimes that can be it can be a glitch. I've had it before where we've put artwork in and I know I've put the cut line on there correctly, but I've gone back into Illustrator, I've resaved the artwork, opened it again in VersaWorks, and there they are. So it is always worth just double checking your artwork, especially if you're doing print, laminate, and cut. What you don't want to do is wait until the point where you want to cut, when you've already printed and laminated the work, to find out that the system hasn't recognized the cut line. So what I would suggest is, if you're doing anything with cut, bring it into VersaWorks, put VersaWorks into cut only mode, and just make sure that you've visibly got those marching ants so you know that the cut line has been recognized. So once we've got that, some of the problems that we've seen people have, the classic one is the double cut. And you see quite a lot, people will put a picture on of a cut sticker, and then there will almost be these little hair width bits of vinyl that are sticking off the edge. And I mean, there's a couple of causes to that. It does tend to be double cutting. It could also be an issue with the blade or the blade holder or the cutting strip. But as I said at the start, all of this is going to sort of be based on the fact that your machine it's calibrated. We're assuming you've got a good blade, a good cut strip, and a good holder. So as long as all of those things are checked and okay, if you do tend to have that, what it can be is a double cut. And what you can find on your artwork is that these two lines look exactly the same. But sometimes when we're creating artwork at scale, let's say, for example, we're doing artwork that's going onto a van, so we might be designing it at 20th or 25th scale, and then we're enlarging it. What a lot of people will do before they enlarge their artwork is they'll expand it all. So let's say, for example, in your vehicle graphics, there's some text with a bubbly outline, and you've created that outline by just using the stroke weight, and you've increased the stroke weight to say 15, so it's quite a big outline. What you'll find is when you bring that into full scale, that outline that you've put on the text will be very, very small. So that will change. And how we stop that is we expand the cut line, and we expand the outline, sorry. And what that does is that it turns that into a path rather than an outline. But if you've already got the cut line on the artwork and you click on expand, if I put the Illustrator now into wire view, what you'll see is that on the left-hand box, you've got a stroke, and on the right-hand box, you've expanded that stroke to an outline. So to the naked eye, when you're checking your artwork, you'll see this magenta line and you'll think, brilliant, my cut line is perfect. If you look at it in wire view, as you can see, you've got these two cutting paths. So it's very, very important that if you are checking your cut lines and you're not sure if you've maybe done this, or you want to be doubly sure that it's all okay, have a look at your cut lines in wire view. So on the Mac, it's Command and Y. I think it's Control and Y on a Windows keyboard. But yeah, Command and Y will put you into wire view, and you'll be able to see that cut line. And as you can see there, the distance between these two is probably not even a mil. So to the naked eye, you won't see it on the screen. You won't see it on VersaWorks. The only time you'll see it is almost when it's too late and it's double cut around the artwork. The other thing that can happen if you're bringing in a customer file, and typical customer, they've told you, yep, they've got all their artwork in high resolution and it's been done by a proper designer, and they send it to you and it's actually a really messy JPEG that somebody's got from their website. And you decide that the quickest way to do it is using image trace or something similar, where you're allowing Illustrator or whatever software you're using to turn that into a vector outline. Sometimes you'll have hidden lines. And so what can happen is when you click on what you think is your cut line and delete it, when you go into the wire view, there's another one hidden behind it. And if that has got the reference of cut contour, or you've selected it by mistake, not knowing it was under there, and turned it into cut contour and it's not visible, then VersaWorks potentially will do another double cut. But this one will be on top of each other, so it will be a lot harder to sort of recover from. And what you'll probably find is it ends up cutting through the backing paper of the vinyl that you're using, and it's ruined the job. So again, if you're using artwork that you haven't done yourself, that somebody sent to you, and you want to just do these double checks, it really is worth stripping back the artwork and making sure that you haven't got any cut lines hidden under visible cut lines. Certainly make sure that things haven't been expanded. And just to go over this one again, because sometimes it's one that people aren't aware of. If we were to click on this line and then go up to Object and click Expand, or if we went to Path and Outline Stroke, they are the two ways that we would turn this line into a double cut. And the reason that those two options exist, let's say, for example, that we were turning this double cut text here into something that we wanted to have an outline. Let's say, for example, we wanted the black text, but we wanted it to have a yellow background. There's a couple of ways that we could do it. So we could click onto the stroke, and we could put a yellow stroke on there. But as you see, that completely wipes out the main lettering. So the proper way to do it would be to go into Object and Expand. And what we're doing there is we're turning the font into separate vector outlines. What we can then do, and you'll see it better if I go into the wire view, is we can go on to Object, Path. We can offset that path, and we can say 0.4 of a millimeter, for example, and you will then get an outside path. Now, as you can see, it has literally expanded all of those paths. So that's what it looks like in non-wire view. This is what it looks like in wire view. And so to clean this up, we would need to ungroup everything. And what we can do then is we can select the individual larger outline sections. Once they're all selected, you can group them. So Command and G is a shortcut for grouping. And then to ungroup, you can do Command, Shift and G. It's just a little bit quicker than going up to the option. So Command and G to group these. And this is a really useful option I'm about to show you, and I'll go through it again a little bit later with other examples. But if we go into Effect and Pathfinder, the Pathfinder tool will, all of those items that are selected, the Pathfinder tool will find the outside path of the combination of all of those outlines. And it's a lot easier to explain if I show you. We will go over it again. If you add a Pathfinder tool and then Object, Expand Appearance, you can see on the screen there what's happened. So what it's created is this really nice, neat outline. Always look out for little bits like this, because like with anything that's done automatically by the computer, sometimes there'll be bits that you don't want, but you can simply go onto those and click them off. And if we go into our normal view, what we can then do is select just the outline, and we can turn it into the yellow that we wanted, drop it to the back. What we've got there is the double cut in black, and then we've got the yellow outline. Now, if we were going to print and cut this, a really easy way to put a bleed onto this is to select the parts that we're going to have as our cut line and just Command and C, copy. Then what we're going to do is just put a stroke on this, and we can make that stroke as big or as small as we want. Command and F to copy it back exactly where it was. So Command and V will paste it anywhere, but Command and F will paste it in exactly the same place. And all we'll do then is we'll get rid of the fill, and we'll add the cut line and put the weight down to 0.25. And what we've created there is our black text with a yellow background, and we've put a cut line in. The other way to have done this in this situation would have been, instead of expanding the fill, what we could have done is we could have just drawn a yellow box, and we could have just dropped that to the back. We wouldn't have needed to put the stroke on. Like with anything, there's 2 or 3 different ways to do all of this. And I'm by no means an illustrator expert. Maybe there's different ways to do the things that we do, but the idea of these sessions is that we're going to sort of show you through the different things that we do day in, day out that work for us. So yeah, that's a really easy way to put an outline and a cut line in there. And of course, if you looked at this when you were sort of thinking about producing it, you might decide to yourself that you wanted to bring those closer together because this is going to be a very thin part of the sticker, or you could expand them a bit depending on what the artwork needed to be. But hopefully that's just given you a little insight into dealing with text and with double lines. Let's have a look and see the next sort of example. So this one here is assuming that we were going to, let's say a customer comes to you with their logo, which is text-based or shape-based, and it isn't going to be one that's suitable for just cutting from coloured vinyl. Let's say, for example, the customer has got a very specific CMYK code for their branding colours, and they only want that particular blue or red or purple or whatever the colour may be. So your only option is to match that colour through printing it, and then we're either going to laminate it and cut it, or we're going to just print and cut it. And so there's two ways of doing this. What we could do is we could just print that specific CMYK colour as a block, and we could drop a cut line on top of it. So the machine is going to print all of this, and then it's going to cut into it. This is a really good way of doing it because you haven't got to think about putting a separate bleed on here or a bleed on all the different text. You can just do one colour and then put your cut lines into it. So when you're going through the printing process, it would just look like the machine is printing a solid block of blue or whatever the colour is, and then you would be putting the cut lines onto it. But if you're very sort of cost conscious and you want to be as efficient as you possibly can and save those pennies, and you don't want to print a huge section of a solid colour, then you can obviously do it this way. And we would deal with this in pretty much the same way that we've just dealt with this double cut text down here. And just to sort of go over it again, let's do that again. So let's say that this is the blue that we want to work on. So what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that it's all selected, and we're going to copy it. And the reason that we're going to do that is because we're going to bring that copied image back on top as our cut line once we've finished putting the bleed on. Now, we could do this one as easily as just selecting a fill and then increasing the weight of that fill. Control and F. Get rid of the fill of the pasted one, and then back onto the outline and put that down to 0.25. And that is probably the easiest way of doing that. And if you've got certainly something that's involving text or it's involving very simple shapes, that is really the easiest way of adding your bleed and your cut line in one go. Simply copy what you want the cut line to be, then make sure you leave it in exactly the same position on the artboard, put the bleed on that you want to do, increase the weight of the lines or however you're going to do it, and then simply Control and F that artwork back on top, turn that copied version into the cut lines, and it's created it for you. And this is what we've done with this lettering example. Again, we've copied so let's just say this is going to be our lettering. So we're going to have our lettering in blue. We're going to make sure that we've expanded it. So it isn't a font anymore, it's now vector paths. And we're going to copy, and then we're going to just go onto the fill, and we're going to increase the weight of the stroke, Control and F, and then what we're going to do is turn the outline of that one, drop it down to 0.25, and there we've got lettering with a bleed and a cut line all in one go. And for anything that's text-based or simple, that really is the easiest way to do it. That leads us on to, let's say, for example, we've got a customer who's got a logo like this that has got a gradient. Now, dealing with gradients and cut lines, it can be really difficult, especially if you've got different gradients involved in a logo. But as with everything, I've tried to make it as simple as possible because I prefer the simple approach. My brain deals with it a lot better. And so I've simplified it, and I'll show you the process that we go through. So let's say, for example, we want to put this test text and we want it to look like this. So you're starting off purple and we're going to blue. What we would do is we'd get that fade. So let's say our customer sent us this. We've worked with our gradient tool and we've managed to match the gradient. Fantastic. We'll bring over the text. So at the moment it's a font. And what we're going to ask Illustrator to do is we're going to ask Illustrator to turn this text into a clipping mask. That means we can lay it over the gradient and we can cut it so we end up with this at the bottom here. It's no good doing it as a font because Illustrator needs to see, if it's going to make a clipping mask, it needs to see vector shapes. So we're going to go to the object, expand, and OK. And that is going to turn our text then, as you can see in the wire view, into separate vector paths rather than a font. Now, let's take the color out of it. If you're not familiar with clipping masks, what I'll do is I'll just do a quick example of a clipping mask first. So let's say, for example, we have this magenta artwork and we have a star, and we want we've got a specific shape that maybe we can't draw automatically on Illustrator. If we take a vector shape and put it on top of a coloured piece or a piece of artwork, and we select the two of them and we do Command and 7, it will do a clipping mask. The long way around there is Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. But as you can see, Command 7 is the hotkey. And that doesn't just work with shapes. It works with, let's use this holiday picture here. As long as your shape is on top, take the fill out of it, select the shape and the image, Command and 7, and that's created a clipping mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that method to turn the text into separate colours. But what you'll see is if you just leave it as normal, so if you expand the text so it's vector lines and select the text and the coloured box and do the clipping mask, it doesn't work. And that is because at the moment, this test text is 8 separate outlines, and Illustrator can't work out what do you want me to do with it. So what you need to do is you need to make this text here what's called a compound path. So you're telling Illustrator that you want it to treat all of these vector outlines as one single thing. So we're going to go into Object, Compound Path, and Make. Now the shortcut for this one, as you can see, is Command and 8. Once we've clicked that, we can then select both Command and 7, and Illustrator has treated the whole of that text as if it's one piece. And this is a really, really useful part of Illustrator because it isn't just text that you can do this with, it's selections of shapes. So let's say, for example, you've got in fact, our business cards is a very good example. So if I just find where our open recent files. That's helpful. It's not the right slide. So if we look at Carl's business card, for example, where we've used this feature is on these icons here. So if we break down these icons, so these icons for mobile phone, email, internet, location, these are all separate vector paths. Now, if I take these apart, so I'm going to use Command Option and 7, and that's ungroup them. What we've got is we've got this purple to like pinky sort of fade that we use on our logo and on our backgrounds at the moment. And so what we've done is we've turned these icons into a compound path, selected them both with the fade in the background, turned them into a clipping mask, and we've got that fade running from the top to the bottom. So it allows, within our branding, it allows consistency across business cards. These could be logos or icons that are going onto a van. It just means that we haven't got to work with each individual one and get that gradient exactly right on each one. So instead of doing 5 sets of gradients on different vectors, we can just do it as one using the compound path tool. So hopefully that's made a little bit of sense, and that will help with a few different things. The example here is probably one of the things I talk about most. If you've watched any of our content where I've talked about products, electrical stickers is a huge thing for us, and this is kind of a day-to-day thing. This is a really simple example of bleed and how to do it. So this is one of our electrical stickers that we do, and for the bleed on this, we literally do Command and C to copy it, put a stroke onto the artwork, Command and F, and then turn that into a 0.25 weighted line without a fill. And there you've got a cut line and a bleed. And although we haven't templated the safe area, what you'll notice is that the artwork is a nicely spaced, text is spaced equally, top and bottom, left and right. We haven't done this where we've kind of gone right to the edges of the sticker. And there's a couple of reasons we don't do that. Number one is if the sticker does run off when it's cutting, we're going to potentially take a number off or part of a letter, but it's also the aesthetics of it afterwards. So when somebody peels that sticker off, we want it to look well balanced. We want it to look like we've purposefully centered everything, that it's a nice looking product. And so having this idea of a safe area around the edge, as well as your bleed on the outside, will make sure that you've got that everything centered on there, and it looks really good when it's finished. So I talked earlier about sometimes we'll bleed out the whole of an artwork, and other times there'll just be elements of a bleed that we need to do, or elements of the artwork that we need to bleed. And this is an example of that. So let's say, for example, we're doing a logo sticker for somebody. It's got their details on there, and all of the elements of the sticker stay within the sticker. It's a white back sticker, so we don't need to do a bleed, but you've got this green bar along the bottom with a phone number in. If we did it like this, especially with anything circular, as you may well have found out, if your machine's going to be off slightly, it's going to be more noticeable on things like circles and ovals, because where the two pieces join, it's going to be more obvious to the eye. And so what we don't want to do is have little bits of white on the edges of this sticker. And so on this particular piece of artwork, I would look at it and think, well, we should really bleed the green out. You might not want to do it as much as this, but you'd certainly want to do something on there. Some people would want to put a nice curve on it, so it looks better when it's handed to the customer, because if it's on a sheet of stickers, so like our electrical stickers come on sheets, what you don't want is lines going off onto the other sticker. And so maybe on this part here, you'd want to bring that in a little bit. But you've got a lot of options with this. If you did want to have it so it looked a little bit neater, what you can always do is copy the cut line, go onto Object and Path, offset that path, let's say 2 mil. What that's created there is obviously an offset line. So we'll get rid of the original cut line. And then on this offset line, what we can do is get rid of the stroke, select the green, and then use our clipping mask. So Command and 7. And then the original cut line that we copied, we can do Command and F, drop that into the middle there. And what you've got is a slightly neater version. So you haven't just got this big rectangle. So when the customer gets it and they've got a sheet of these stickers, they don't suddenly look at it and think, oh, what's gone wrong here? It looks circular, and it's not something that you need to do, but it's one of those little aesthetic touches that can, it can mean that your sheet of stickers or labels or whatever you've sent out is more aesthetically pleasing. And then that becomes the differentiator between you and a company that they used to use. It looks like you care more about the overall look of the sticker. And the most important thing is that you've put yourself a bleed line on there. And so the customer's going to get a really nicely finished sticker. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes on circles, if your calibration is slightly off, you can get this sort of odd little notch in the circle where the cut isn't absolutely spot on. Another cause of that can be if you've created a custom path for the machine to cut. And I know this is a very bizarre shape, but this is just an example. So let's say you've got something that's, a logo that's this shape, and you've had to create your own cut path. And you think to yourself, when you cut it on the machine, there's all these little gaps or there's little inconsistencies. If you click on a cut line, what you can see here is that it's only actually selecting part of the cut line. And if we click on the part that it wasn't selecting, you can see that this cut line is actually in two separate pieces. So what can happen, again, if we zoom in and we go to the wireframes view, so Command and Y, you can see that these two cut paths aren't actually joined. And this doesn't only happen when you're using, like you've drawn it manually, or you've used the image trace. It can be other people have sent you artwork and they've just not made sure that the cut paths are neat. And so just to do it, what you can do is you can click onto the direct selection tool, grab onto that node there, put the two ends together, select those two ends, and Command and J will join that path at that end. You can then check to see if it needs joining at the other end, click on it, and you'll see that it highlights all of it as one shape. And that will solve that issue then, where instead of the machine seeing this as two separate sections, it will see it as one cut path. And so you'll get a much more consistent path. So it's really worth checking not only that you haven't got double cuts, that you haven't got hidden cut lines, but also that all of the cut paths that are on there are all joined together, so the machine is going to see it as one long cut path. Up here, we've got an example of a cut path that has been created by image tracing. So as you look at the cut line, you can see that it goes around the shape, it matches the artwork. So this is a piece of artwork that I've just pulled off the internet as an example of the sort of thing that a customer might send you for stickers or for logos or for vehicle branding or something. And all we've done with this one, if I just take this artwork away from the main artboard. So to create that, all I've done is I've done a copy of the original thing, and I've literally just clicked on image trace. It's come up with this. So you can see that Illustrator has worked to create a vector version of what was there. I've clicked on expand, and what that has done is it's turned it all into separate objects onto the direct selection tool, which then allows me to get rid of all the bits that we don't want. And I've literally just gone into the center of that artwork and made sure that we delete it all. And that leaves us with, if we go into wire view, just a very simple outline of what the shape was. I've then turned that into an outline, put it down to the correct weight. I've done that. And then I've moved it onto the artwork where we want to position it. Now, obviously, that won't give us much of a gap if we wanted the black background to be shown. So I've gone into this object path and offset path again. We'll pick whatever we want our bleed to be, 0.5 in this case, and then onto the direct selection tool, and then got rid of the original one. So we're only left with one cut line around the artwork. And obviously you wouldn't want, if this was a sticker that you were printing, you wouldn't want to waste all of this area. So what you can do is you could just create another one of these. So we could go object, path, and offset path again. But if we separate them, what we would do is we could then turn this one to a blank, select it all, clip it down, and then we could put our cut line back on there. So then the machine wouldn't be printing a whole wasted area around there. It would just print the sticker that we want. We can drop our cut line back into where we want it, and then we've built ourselves an element of bleed in there. We've got a safe area around the artwork. It's the shape that the customer wants, and it's taken very little work. Let's have a look at the next one. So this one here is an example of, it's a logo for a gas engineer for whom we've done stickers, we've done site boards, clothing, workwear, we've done vehicle graphics. And the challenge with this particular print is that we wanted to do it in one piece. What we didn't want is to do the orange gradient and the blue gradient and put them together because it was a black van. So if we didn't lay these up together perfectly, you would see the black of the van come through the back. So we wanted to print this as one section. And so what we did with the cut line, around the main part of the logo, it was very simple. All we did is copy the logo, turn it into an outline, and bring it inside the shape a little bit. Where it did become a little bit more challenging was where the orange and the blue met, and we needed this point to be quite accurate. And so what we did is we manually adjusted the cut line to just come in a little bit here where the blue and the orange joined, and also at this point here. So what you've actually got is in this corner that there is no bleed, and it worked quite well. On one of them, we did have a little bit of white showing here, but what we were able to do is just manually trim that out. But for the rest of the more complex parts of the logo, the curved parts where you wouldn't really want to be doing any manual cutting, that was all fine. In those little joins here, we just had to sort of manually come in and cut a little bit there, and it looked fine. And what you will find with things like this, as printers, I think we all tend to be probably more self-critical than our customers ever will be, really. So a lot of the time we do find that we're looking at things probably more than our customers are, which certainly isn't a bad thing. But yeah, so on these bits, sometimes there is a little bit of manual work to be done to make sure that we're getting the best that we can from that. On this one here, this is a good example of a sticker, printed sticker that was then cut, that needed a mixture of bleed and non-bleed. So you've got a white area here. The idea was that we were printing this section and it was being applied to a black substrate. So we just needed to print this white box with the little red boxes. But obviously with the bleed, we had to make sure that we had a crisp white line here, and there were only certain elements of the artwork that needed a bleed. And if I deconstruct what we've done here, all we've done is just drop a manually built box behind it. So I've literally, get rid of that, with the drawing tool, I've literally just started here, gone up there, come down here, and just drawn in a bleed. And using Command Shift and the left bracket button, we can drop it to the back, or you can go to Object, Arrange, and Send backwards. So Command, Shift, and left bracket. And then if you want to, just for neatness, you can then go into it and you can manually make sure it looks nice and square. It depends what you're doing with it. I mean, if this is something that you're going to print in the print room and you are going to be the only guys or girls that see it, it's going to get weeded before the customer sees it. You could make that box as messy as you like, or whatever shape you wanted, as long as it served the purpose of creating that usable bleed for you. It doesn't really matter. We always try and get into the habit of making the artwork look pretty, because we tend to take a lot of pictures for social media of jobs printing, and so I want everything to look neat and tidy, because a lot of customers don't understand the bleed side of things, or why artwork is set up in a certain way, and why should they? That's not their job. So you can make that as, it doesn't matter if it looks like this, it's still going to do the job. You'll waste a little bit more ink, but that won't even cost you a penny. So set it up as you want to set it up, really. And then again, what I've done to create this box is that I've selected from the original artwork. If we go onto the main selection tool, if we bring the original logo over to the side, so you can see what we did. So first of all, if we select it and Command, Shift, and G to make sure it's all ungrouped, the first thing that I wanted to do was just take all the lettering out, because all we're looking for this is a cut line, which is going to be the outside shape. So once we've taken the lettering out, what we've got left is we've got these 3 rectangles, and then we've got these little triangles that have been put in. So what we're going to do is select them all, Command and G to group them together. And then we're going to use this fantastic Pathfinder tool. So Pathfinder and Add, which turns it into one big path. And we're going to say Object, Expand Appearance, and that is going to trace around the outside for us. We're then going to put it into wire view just to check there's no little bits been left, and that is one outline. And then if we turn that into our Roland cut contour colour, get rid of the fill, turn it into our cut contour colour, drop the weight down, we've created a cut line for ourselves, and we know it's exactly the right size because we've created it from the original shapes. And so with something like that, it can just be as simple as deconstructing it and trying to find out where the outside, where the outside line is, and just trying to make it as simple as possible. I mean, let's say, for example, you probably wouldn't have, but you've got a star and a square, and you've got a circle here, and these are all different elements that are going together. Maybe it's a sail or something, and people have got different things written in here. And then you've got this custom, like hand-drawn shape triangle here. And let's say that these are all different elements of artwork that you want to print. So bad on there. Just put one colour on there. That one is orange. So we need a cut line that goes around all of these crazy shapes. What we can do is we can just copy them all together and put them down here. And then we'll use that exact same process. So we'll group them. We'll go on to Effect, Pathfinder, Add. They'll all change to one color because Illustrator's now putting them all as one big shape. Object, Expand Appearance. And then all we'll do is we'll get rid of the fill, turn it into a cut line. And then we've just created ourselves this easy cut line that does everything that we want. It goes round all the different shapes. We know it's exactly the same shape. It's exactly the same size because we've used the artwork to create it. And so that gives us the cut line. The problem then comes when we start to think, okay, how do we put a bleed on a very, very complex shape? Because if we use the way that we've been thinking about earlier, that we spoke about, where we just put a stroke on, if we put a stroke onto all of these different shapes, what you're going to get is you're going to get a very confused bleed because there's going to be lots of overlaps. There's going to be things that sit on top of each other that we don't want to sit there. If the cutter does go off, we're going to have an element here where there's all of a sudden this blue shape here is not meant to be this big. It's not meant to intrude there, but we want bleed down here. And so these are the sort where we have to sort of think about how are we actually going to put this together, because as you can see, by increasing the weight of all of these, each shape has encroached on each other within the artwork, and all we really wanted to change was the outside. So there's a couple of options. What we could do is we could copy all of these shapes. Once we've copied it, we could then get rid of all the fills, Command and F to put it back there, and then our Command, Shift and left bracket to put it at the back. So the internal parts of these shapes are still exactly in their right positions, and we've been left with a bleed over the outside, which isn't actually that bad. But let's say, for example, that this cut line here went off slightly, you'd end up with a little bit of light green where you didn't really want it. And so what we do to combat that, if I use these shapes down here as an example, so very similar, but done with rectangles, so it's a bit easier to explain. That's what we're trying to achieve. There's our cut line, and here is the artwork with bleed. And in those corners where there could potentially be a conflict between the two colours, rather than having one colour take over the other, all that we've done is we've put a 45-degree diagonal join. So if the cut line was to go off here, you may have to do a little bit of trimming on the outside, but the continuity of this line is still going to remain. And there will always be those pieces of artwork where, because there are so many colours or there are so many different layers, that it's really difficult to decide which colour or which feature gets priority, because if your cut line was to go off ever so slightly, it could potentially, ruin the main part of the artwork. And so on occasions, like I described with this one here, there will be elements where you just don't have much bleed. It's either very, very thin or you have none at all. And that's where it's really important that your machine is set up and it's calibrated and everything is absolutely spot on with the machine, because then you can rely more heavily on that cut line and the fact that the machine will cut exactly where it's meant to. Cut lines, gradients. I'm just trying to go through anything else. So yeah, there will be elements where you just cannot have any bleed on there because of how complex it is, and sometimes it does work. I mean, these are just some example stickers that we did of our logo with a weird coloured thing around it, and if we peel those off, you'll see that there is hardly any bleed whatsoever because I've put the cut line right on the end of the work. And that has worked okay. So there's a very, very slight white line around the edge of there, which as a printer, you're probably going to notice. As a customer who's taking this sticker and using it for something promotional, you're probably not going to notice. That was a short run of stickers that we did, and I knew that the machine was calibrated and worked really well. The cut lines were usually spot on. So sometimes you can get away with it. Other times you need it to be absolutely spot on, so you do put yourself some bleed on there. There's nothing wrong with if you've got a piece of artwork that somebody sends you. Let's use we use this eagle logo again as an example. Let's say, I don't know, let's say for example that image trace didn't work and you had to do something manually. You can still go into the artwork with the manual drawing tool, and you can sort of zoom in on certain elements and you can make sure that you've got it exactly right. But you can manually draw cut lines yourself to fit alongside artwork. And sometimes, that is something that we have to do. So that's another thing that you could do. You can then go into it and you can manually adjust each node of the cut line and bring it in and make sure that it's absolutely spot on. But just make sure that if a job is something where you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to manually draw a cut line, or you're going to have to spend some time vectorizing somebody's artwork to enable you to add a cut line, make sure that when you look at the job that you're building in a cost for that as well, and that you're not doing this work for free, because this is the side of things that as print business owners, we all know it happens, and a lot of us just write it off as a cost of doing business. Well, it isn't. It's a skill that takes years for people to learn, and it's a big part of a job, often something that can take half an hour, maybe even longer, depending on the job. So make sure that you're building that in as part of a cost of your quote, and don't be afraid to tell the customer about it, because a lot of the time our customers have been sold, when it comes to logo design, they've been sold something that maybe they haven't understood. So they've had a logo which looks really good on their website or on their business card, but what they haven't got is a suitable digital asset that will allow them to then use that logo across all the different touch points that they want to. So we spend quite a lot of time talking to our customers about the availability of a vector logo for them. So for example, if somebody comes to us and says they want a set of stickers or they want vehicle graphics, I'll ask them to send their logo file in a vector format. Usually they'll say, I've only got a JPEG or something similar. And when we look at it, I will have a discussion with them about really we could do with a vector logo. What a vector logo does is it allows you to have it at any size without loss of clarity. And most of our customers don't understand what that means. They don't understand the different logo types. And again, why should they? It's not what they do. And it's a really good opportunity, not just for us to upsell, to make more money, because that's what we all run print businesses for. But it's also a good opportunity to try and then in the future retain that customer, because you're demonstrating to them your knowledge, your professionalism, and also the fact that you're going to put time and effort into creating something for them that is then going to allow them to have consistency across all the different touch points of their business. And so why would they not then come back to you for all of that extra print work that they want? So I've gone off on a tangent ever so slightly there. What I will do now is just stop sharing the screen and just have a quick look at the chat. Tom and Carl have been monitoring the chat. Have you got any questions, guys, that you want me to answer? No questions at the moment. Okay. Vectorizing charge is a must. Yeah, you're right. Lisa's just said, as you can see in the chat, the vectorizing charge is a must. It really it really is a good opportunity. We spend a lot of time vectorizing people's artwork, changing logos for them, adding text. A lot of people over the last few years have used things like Fiverr, things where people have had cheap products but not stuff that they can use. How did you create the full? Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me reshare the screen and I'll show you that one, Vicky. So there's a couple of different ways. All I did on this one is cheekily dropped in a little triangle there. So as you can see, I just drew a coloured triangle in there. What I could have done, the other thing that I could have done is I could have created this as a separate rectangle and put a node in there and dragged it in. But for speed, I literally just put a rectangle of the colour in because it doesn't matter. That's not going to affect the cut path. It's just another little piece of colour that's in there. Did exactly the same up here with a little green triangle down there. There's lots of different ways of doing it. I just try and think to myself, I always sit in front of a piece of artwork like this and try and think, right, when it comes to this corner, what happens if the machine does go off? What's the best way that I can then recover it? And at least here, you've got a 50-50 chance that if it does go off on this corner, that you can trim it down and fix it that way. So I hope, where are we now? 8 o'clock. I hope that's helped a little bit with a few of those little bits. They are the most common things that we get asked. It's by no means an exhaustive list of things to do with bleed and cut lines, but hopefully it'll just give people a bit of an overview of the most common problems that we have. We have been recording this, so we're going to share it on the YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it back, you can do. But as I said earlier, it's a genuine offer. There's no catch, nothing. We're not planning on charging for any of this content. The idea behind it all, as I said, is just to help people learn the stuff that really we had to sort of learn ourselves. When I started the Vinyl Guys, I was self-taught with pretty much everything because every door I knocked on, every print business I asked for help, they didn't really want to share anything. And I think in our industry, there's a really good sense of community, but there's still that limit to what people want to share. People don't want to talk about pricing or materials or processes. And that's what we want to do. We want to openly say to people, if you've got a question about pricing a job, doing artwork, growing your business, come and speak to us. Because my thoughts are that if we can all get together as an industry and lift the quality of what we're doing and make sure that we're truly charging what we're worth, it will make the industry better. And those people who are charging, basic prices for what they're doing, hopefully they'll start to understand that they're worth more. What they're doing is worth more, and everyone will start charging a bit more, and the industry will grow, and we'll all get through the tougher times together because we'll have charged the money that we're worth, really. So don't be afraid to drop us an email or a DM. Anything tech related, Carl will answer. As I'm sure you all know, Carl is a bit of a tech wizard with anything to do with Roland. So if you've got any problems with calibration or printing or anything to do with your machine, give Carl a shout. Tom works tirelessly in our workshop. He's got his camera turned off at the moment. I think he's a little bit shy. But Tom knows how we achieve the quality that we do with cutting and finishing and laminating and packing. And obviously I can answer any questions about the pricing and material and the business side of things. So hopefully between the three of us, if you've got any questions, then we can certainly answer them. We would really appreciate people subscribing to our YouTube channel. The idea behind that is that we're going to be sharing lots of little videos as well as the longer form stuff about what we do day to day, about how we make our printers make money, about how we promote what we do. You'll see loads of helpful Roland videos on there as well. So any support that you can give us there, we'd really appreciate. But thank you very much for watching. I'll let you all get on with your days and evenings, and I think I might have a wander over to the pub for a Coke. And Tom and Carl, I'll see you on Monday. Thanks for logging in your own time and monitoring the chats. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for joining us. I'll speak to you all very soon. Thank you very much.